Dhurandhar, the new beginning for Indian cinema, is not just a catchy title, it captures what many viewers, critics, and industry insiders are already feeling. In one stroke, Aditya Dhar's espionage epic has redefined what a mainstream Hindi movie can talk about, how it can be structured, and how far it can go in fusing politics, realism, and spectacle without losing the audience. It has become the rare film that is discussed simultaneously in trade circles, political debates, academic essays, and casual WhatsApp chats. On paper, Dhurandhar looks like a contradiction. It is a 3.5-hour espionage thriller set largely in Karachi's liary underworld, unapologetically violent, deeply political, and overwhelmingly populated by morally compromised characters. It released only in Hindi, without the safety net of South Indian dubs or a China release, and found itself banned across all 6 Gulf nations over its perceived anti-Pakistan messaging. Yet by around 4 weeks, it had already amassed roughly Rs 740 to 748 crore net in India, about 260 plus crore overseas, and a worldwide gross in the 1140 to 1165 crore range, making it one of the biggest Hindi origin films ever without the usual foreign crutches. What makes this achievement so meaningful is that it has been accompanied by a kind of grassroots frenzy rarely seen in recent years. Specific scenes, Akshay Khanna's entry as Rahman Dakat, Sanjay Dutt's deadly comic beats, the 2611 TV sequence have exploded into memes, fan edits, and detailed breakdowns. Long Twitter X threads decode the politics, Instagram and YouTube are full of explainers, and even accounts linked to Pakistan's information ecosystem have been caught trying to spin the film's narrative for their own purposes. Instead of the release week noise, second week silence pattern seen with some earlier 1000 crore claims, Dhurandhar is still being argued over weeks into its run. At the heart of this phenomenon is a creative choice. Dhar decided to treat the audience as adults, not as consumers of disposable spectacle. Dhurandhar refuses to spoon feed. It opens with the trauma of hijacks and terror attacks, then spends patient time embedding its spy in an alien ecosystem, trusting viewers to stay with the material as the world unfolds layer by layer. It assumes the average moviegoer can follow complex power structures, keep track of multiple antagonists, and handle the discomfort of ambiguity rather than receiving moral lectures at the end. This respect for the audience is visible in the way characters enter the film. Hamza Ali Mazari, played by Ranveer Singh, does not get a slow-motion heroic intro with choreographed applause. He appears as a beaten, hungry outsider struggling to fit into a liary juice shop and spends what feels like an entire movie just earning the right to be in the frame. Rahman Dakat, essayed by Akshay Khanna, is not announced with background voice or expository montage. He simply walks into scenes and takes ownership of them through the way he looks, listens, and punishes. Ajay Sanyal, portrayed by R. Madhavan, is not a loud patriotic boss type. He is a man who has seen the Indian state fail too many times and responds by designing a long, morally dangerous countergame. This is where Dhurandhar quietly breaks from a major chunk of legacy Bollywood. The film's world is not built around a star's aura. The star is folded into a system of people and institutions that existed before he arrived and will continue after he leaves. That sense of continuity, of a universe larger than any one character, is what makes the movie feel like a new creative baseline rather than just another hit. More than a blockbuster, Dhurandhar is a signal that Indian audiences are ready to follow grim, complicated stories, that they are willing to engage with uncomfortable politics, and that they will reward filmmakers who trust their intelligence. In that sense, it is a legitimate new beginning for Indian cinema.
For decades, Hindi spy films mostly lived in two worlds, either broad patriotic adventures with globe-trotting heroes or low-budget thrillers with limited scope. The Yash Raj film's spy universe, Ek Tha Tiger, Tiger Zinda Hai, War, Pathan, packaged espionage as high-gloss fantasy, glamorous agings, exotic locations, vague geopolitics, and a heavy emphasis on style over statecraft. These films were entertaining and often well-crafted in their own way, but they rarely tried to capture what being a spy actually feels like. Dhurandhar blows that template open. It presents espionage as an occupation of time and space, a brutal, lonely, morally corrosive existence where you are never fully yourself and never fully the persona you're wearing. Hamza's journey into Layari is presented as a series of small humiliations and slow upgrades. He lives at the shop, works like a laborer, learns the local power map, gets beaten, and only gradually earns his way into larger circles of trust. There are no gadgets in sight, no jaw-dropping stunt entries. The thrill comes from watching information change hands and allegiances shift. The film's chapter-wise structure reinforces this feeling of a long, complex operation. Each chapter deals with a different aspect of life in and around Layali, a rival gang, a political election, an ISI deal, a marriage alliance. Yet all of them are interconnected stages in Operation Dhurandhar. This is espionage as a series of dossiers and case files, not just a montage of missions. Viewers feel the weight of time, the years Hamza spends embedded, the slow build-up to betrayals, the cumulative cost of every decision he makes. Crucially, Dhurandhar gives us three distinct centers of intelligence. Ajay Sanyal in Delhi, representing an Indian deep state that finally chooses to move from reactive defense to proactive infiltration. Major Iqbal and the ISI apparatus in Pakistan using underworld channels to bleed India through weapons, fake currency and terror. The Layari gang network itself, where power flows through Rahman Dakat and his rivals, who are both tools and manipulators of state actors. This triangular structure makes the film feel more like classic political espionage fiction than anything Bollywood has attempted at this scale. It acknowledges that intelligence work is not just about India versus Pakistan, but about partial alliances, internal rivalries, and overlapping interests. Police versus gangs versus ISI versus politicians, all operating inside one fragile ecosystem. By doing this and still becoming a huge hit, Dhurandhar proves a crucial point. Indian audiences will embrace procedural detail and complex geopolitics as long as the storytelling is gripping. This has massive implications for the future. Writers now have a reference point for a spy film where viewers happily track long conversations, strategic calculations, and morally grey decisions without craving a song break every 10 minutes. The YRF spy universe may continue, but now it has to exist in a landscape where viewers have tasted something far more grounded and politically charged. That alone marks Dhurandhar as a new beginning. It has raised the floor for what spy cinema in India is expected to deliver.
One of the most striking ways Dhurandhar resets Indian cinema is in its unflinching portrayal of Pakistan and ISI. For years, mainstream Hindi films often took a cautious route. Either Pakistan was left unnamed or Pakistani characters were carefully balanced, a good ISI officer here, a romantic heroine there, to avoid overt confrontation. This was partly commercial prudence, partly a hangover of older political thinking that emphasized people-to-people ties and soft edges. Dhurandhar discards that approach completely. Here, Pakistan is explicitly identified as a state sponsor of terror, its security agencies are depicted as orchestrating and funding violence, and Layari's underworld is presented as a functional arm of that strategy. The film does not look for good ISI characters to soothe the conscience. Instead, it concentrates on degrees of evil, opportunism, and cynicism within the system. Dialogues in the film are not subtle about this. Lines about India's biggest enemy being India itself before Pakistan reveal a worldview that is willing to criticize internal weakness while still placing the primary blame for cross-border terror squarely on the Pakistani deep state. That balancing act, anger inward and anger outward, is part of what gives Dhurandhar its emotional charge. It taps into an existing public frustration about perceived inaction and appeasement in the face of terror. Naturally, this has provoked strong reactions. For many Indian viewers, especially those who welcomed films like Uri, The Kashmir Files and The Kerala Story, Dhurandhar feels like the next logical step in asserting narrative sovereignty. The right to tell the India-Pakistan story from a firm Indian vantage point without apologizing or softening edges. Opinion columns celebrate it as the end of what they see as a decades-long pro-Pakistan bias in Bollywood storytelling. On the other side, critics in India and abroad accuse Dhurandhar of peddling a bigoted Islamophobic worldview, even though the film never explicitly mentions Islam or Muslims and keeps its focus on terrorism and gangsters operating in Pakistan, which happens to be an Islamic country. They highlight that most key Pakistani characters are tied to violence or its machinery and argue that this flattens complex histories and communities into a simple good India versus evil Pakistan framework. In doing so, these critics overlook how anti-India sentiment has been documented as deeply ingrained in sections of Pakistani society through school curricula and state narratives, a context the film's supporters see as relevant to its portrayal. Yet even these critics often concede that the film's craft and depth make it harder to dismiss than simplistic propaganda. What Dhurandhar has done, in other words, is shift the center of gravity. It has shifted the idea that a mainstream Hindi blockbuster can unapologetically name Pakistan as the antagonist, challenge older balanced portrayals, and still draw huge crowds. Future filmmakers cannot ignore this precedent. Even if they disagree with Dhar's politics, they will have to define their stance in relation to Dhurandhar, not in a vacuum. That is precisely how a new beginning looks in political cinema. Not everyone agrees with it, but everyone has to react to it.
If Hollywood has used war and spy movies as soft power for decades, Dhurandhar feels like one of the first Hindi films to consciously operate on that level. It is not just about domestic politics. It is about projecting a version of India's strategic culture to the world. On the surface, the film showcases an Indian state that has learned from humiliation and now plays the long game. Ajay Sanyal symbolizes a deep state willing to recruit a death row convict, plant him inside enemy structures, and patiently build leverage over years rather than chasing short-term wins. For foreign viewers who encounter the film on streaming, this is a dramatically different image from the song and dance stereotype often attached to Bollywood. It presents India as a serious, calculating player in the shadow war with Pakistan. Inside India, Dhurandhar's impact is powered by something more tangible than box office graphs. A frenzy of conversation that cuts across every layer of public life. Everyone from politicians to stand-up comics, from mainstream critics to policy analysts seems to have taken a position on it, while TV panels yell over whether the film is patriotic truth-telling or dangerous polarization. And even Pakistani commentators and officials have felt the need to respond in public. On social media, memes and reels like First Day as Spy in Pakistan, Akshay Khanna's now iconic dance to Fasla, punchlines on key dialogues and edits built around the film's background score have gone viral, with audiences raving about the muscular BGM, the clever use of retro Bollywood tracks, and the presence of marquee English-language rappers like Hanuman Kind and Rebel in the soundtrack. This groundswell of chatter stands in sharp contrast to certain earlier mega-grossers where the box office graph soared but the cultural conversation remained surprisingly shallow. With some films, people remember a couple of songs and a memeable dialogue. With Dhurandhar, they remember arguments, long debates, and detailed scene breakdowns. That qualitative difference is important. It has also rehabilitated the idea that box office success can be felt, not just read in a tweet. In an era where investigative reports and insiders have openly admitted that Bollywood numbers are sometimes padded through block bookings and creative PR, there is a healthy skepticism about any sudden 1,000 crore claim that isn't backed by visible excitement on the ground. Dhurandhar's packed theaters, spillover shows, and constant online noise give audiences a reference point for what an authentically huge hit looks like. This doesn't mean other films didn't genuinely earn what they reported. It means Dhurandhar has reset the public's BS detector. The next time a project announces an astronomical gross with relatively little buzz, people will instinctively compare it to this film's trajectory and ask uncomfortable questions. That too is a new beginning, a more demanding, less easily manipulated audience. In soft power terms, Dhurandhar also announces a shift from India as charming musical exporter to India as a nation that tells hard geopolitical stories. Whether one loves or hates the specific politics of this film, it is hard to deny that it has expanded the range of what Indian cinema can represent in global discourse.
Perhaps the clearest sign that Dhurandhar is a new beginning is that its story isn't over, either in universe or in the industry. Dhurandhar 2 has been locked for 19 March 2026 as a full pan-India release in Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, Kannada and Malayalam, an expansion the first film never had. The makers are explicitly treating the sequel as a test of whether this new kind of spy film can scale even further across regions and languages. Expectations are high on two fronts. Narratively, audiences want to see Hamza's unfinished business, the confrontation with Major Iqbal and the larger terror ecosystem that survived Rahman Dakat. They want more of Ajay Sanyal's mind at work, more training, more glimpses into India's strategic planning. They want to know what happens to Yelena and Liari once Hamza effectively becomes the true power center.
In other words, they want the second half of an arc that has already reshaped their expectations of Hindi storytelling. Industry-wise, Dhurandhar 2 will be the moment when other studios and banners finally see whether this new model is an outlier or a sustainable pattern. If a multi-language sequel with a similar level of density and political sharpness matches or exceeds the first film's performance, it will become very hard for big-ticket projects to retreat back into the safe, bland, all sides are nice spy stories of the past. There'll be strong pressure either to adopt Dhar-style realism and ideological clarity or to deliberately choose a very different, openly escapist tone. Meanwhile, Dhurandhar's subtle links with Uri, the reuse of the name Jaskirat Singh Rangi, the shared director, the similar obsession with military and intelligence craft suggest that Aditya Dhar is thinking in terms of worlds, not one-offs. He may never officially declare a single connected universe, but the fact that fans are speculating about it at all shows how the mental model of Hindi cinema is changing. Directors are now expected to build coherent ecosystems of stories, just as Hollywood has done with its franchises, but with far more political charge. Ultimately, the most important thing Dhurandhar does is not political or commercial. It is psychological. It tells Indian filmmakers that the audience is ready for more. More complexity in character and plot, more honesty about national trauma and anger, more ambitious use of cinema as a tool of narrative power and soft power. And it tells audiences that their engagement matters. The heated debates, the fan theories, the criticisms and the praise have all ensured that Dhurandhar is not just consumed and forgotten, it is lived with. The film has become a reference point, a metaphor, a litmus test, and that is exactly what the new beginning for Indian cinema should look like. Whether future films build on its strengths or react against its excesses, Dhurandhar has already done what very few works manage. It has shifted the horizon of expectation. From now on, when we talk about what Hindi cinema can be, politically, aesthetically or commercially, we'll talk about it before Dhurandhar and after Dhurandhar.